No one expected this. Just days after the world mourned the death of Pope Francis, his sister broke her silence. And what she revealed has left even the most devoted Catholics speechless. Hidden truths, emotional memories, and a side of Pope Francis the world never knew until now. As tributes poured in from every corner of the world following the passing of Pope Francis, many thought they had heard everything there was to know about the beloved leader of the Catholic Church. But then, completely out of the blue, his sister Maria Elena Bergoglio stepped forward. For years, she remained silent, rarely speaking to the media and keeping her private thoughts away from the public eye. But something about her brother's death compelled her to speak. And what she shared wasn't just touching, it was revealing, emotional, and in some ways controversial. In this video, we're going to explore everything Maria Elena revealed, including details about her brother's final days, personal regrets, untold stories from their childhood in Argentina, and the pressure he faced behind Vatican walls. We'll also dive into how the Church responded to her emotional tribute, how the public reacted, and why her words are sparking so much conversation around the globe. Stick around because as we go deeper, you'll hear some truly unexpected truths about Pope Francis, the kind that challenge the polished image many have held of him for years. And trust me, what Maria Elena said near the end of her statement left the room silent. Let's get into it. For over a decade, Maria Elena Bergoglio, the only surviving sibling of Pope Francis, chose a life far from the public spotlight. While her brother, born Jorge Mario, rose to become one of the most recognizable religious figures in the world, Maria Elena remained in Argentina, living quietly, rarely granting interviews, and never once attempting to profit from her brother's fame. But following the Pope's death at age 88, something inside her shifted. She released a statement that was not orchestrated by Vatican officials, nor filtered through church media. It was raw, it was honest, and it was deeply personal. In her first televised remarks since his passing, Maria Elena said, "He was not just the Pope to me. He was Jorge, my brother, the boy who chased dogs in the yard, who made me laugh when I was sick, and who cried the night our father died." She paused and then added something that stunned reporters. "I never wanted him to become Pope. It cost us more than the world will ever know." That sentence alone raised countless eyebrows. What did she mean? What had it cost them? And why had she never voiced this before? In the days that followed, journalists and faithful followers alike began digging deeper. What else had Maria Elena hidden all these years? And why, of all moments, did she choose now to speak? But that was only the beginning. What she revealed next made headlines across the globe, and it wasn't about church politics or theology. It was about family, sacrifice, and a truth that may challenge the legacy of the man millions revered. Maria Elena didn't just speak from grief. She spoke from memory. And as she continued sharing, the world got a rare glimpse behind the veil of Vatican formality and into the childhood of the man who would become Pope. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, long before he wore the white cassock, was a curious and introspective boy growing up in Buenos Aires. Maria described him as quiet but fiercely protective. Even as a child, he had this burden about him, like he was carrying something bigger than himself, she recalled. But what most people don't know is that before the church, there was someone else who shaped his soul. She spoke about their grandmother, Rosa, a devout woman with a strong moral compass and even stronger opinions. According to Maria, Rosa instilled a spiritual fire in Jorge that burned for justice, compassion, and penance. But here is where things took an unexpected turn. Maria revealed that as children, they endured deep personal trauma that Jorge carried with him all the way to Rome. There was an incident in our family that left us all fractured. It was a betrayal, not of faith, but of blood. Jorge took it the hardest, she said. What exactly was this betrayal? According to Maria, it had to do with their father and a hidden truth that was covered up for decades, a secret second family. She stopped short of naming names but said that Jorge learned of this around age 12. From that moment on, his innocence was stolen. He became obsessed with righteousness, perhaps in an attempt to cleanse the sins of the people he loved most. Maria claimed that this hidden family dynamic heavily influenced Jorge's decision to become a priest. He didn't run to God because he felt called. He ran because he was trying to escape the shame, she said solemnly. That revelation stunned both Catholic insiders and long-time followers. Suddenly the image of Pope Francis as a man of humility and self-sacrifice took on a new meaning. What if his humility wasn't just virtue, but also a form of personal atonement? Maria's words struck a nerve not just because of what they said about the man, but because of what they suggested about the burdens he carried, burdens that may have shaped every decision he made as the head of the Catholic Church. And just when the public thought they'd heard the most shocking part, Maria hinted there was even more. Something she said the Church would prefer I never speak about. So what was it? Maria claimed her brother had compiled a private collection of documents, letters, and recordings during his time as Archbishop of Buenos Aires and later as Pope. This collection, referred to within the Vatican as Il dossier nascosto, the hidden file, was never made public. Not even his closest advisers, she said, knew the full extent of what was inside. But how did she know? Maria said that during his last visit to Argentina before becoming Pope, Jorge entrusted her with a handwritten letter and a key, a literal key, she explained, to a private safe stored in a hidden archive below Vatican City. In the letter, he wrote cryptically, "If anything happens to me and the world starts asking why I kept silent on certain matters, tell them to look beyond the gold and marble. Tell them to look where even light avoids the corner. Maria never used the key." Out of respect for her brother's wishes, she left the letter sealed until the morning he passed away. And when she opened it, what she found was stunning. A confession of sorts. In Jorge's own handwriting, he admitted to discovering something that shook his faith to its core, a web of financial corruption, high-ranking abuse cover-ups, and secret dealings between the Vatican and authoritarian governments. He didn't name names in that letter, Maria explained, but he left enough clues to let her know that he was caught between his duty as a moral leader and his fear of destroying the Church. What makes this story even more unsettling is that Pope Francis reportedly chose silence over exposure, not because he was complicit, but because he believed the Church could not survive another global scandal. He made a calculated decision to reform quietly, slowly, from the inside. But according to Maria, Jorge regretted that decision in his final years. He felt that perhaps the Church needed to be broken completely in order to be rebuilt honestly. "He once told me," she whispered, "maybe I was too soft. Maybe I should have been the Pope who ended the lies, not protected them." In the weeks before his death, Jorge tried to arrange for those files to be released posthumously. But something or someone intervened. The file, she claims, has since vanished from where it was stored. Vatican officials deny its existence. No one will acknowledge its presence. But Maria is adamant. They know it's real, and they're terrified of what's in it. The biggest question now, what was so dangerous inside that file that even a pope feared to release it? After Maria Elena's first wave of revelations shook the faithful and left many asking hard questions, she sat down for one final interview, one she hesitated to give. Her voice trembled, not from emotion, but from the weight of responsibility. She said she had debated for years whether to speak about this next part, because it wasn't just about her brother. It was about secrets kept in the highest corridors of the Vatican, secrets Pope Francis took to his grave. "You must understand," she began carefully. Jorge believed there were things the world wasn't ready to know. Not because they were evil, but because they could unravel everything people believed in. Maria claimed her brother had spent years trying to expose what he called the quiet tragedies, cases of abuse and mistreatment that were never documented, never brought to light because they occurred in remote missions, impoverished parishes, or parts of the world the Church considered too volatile to intervene. Many of the victims were children from developing countries. Jorge believed they were forgotten not just by the world, but by the very Church that was supposed to protect them. He told me that there were entire files that were never logged, Maria revealed, cases that bishops were instructed to bury, bribes that were paid to silence witnesses, and priests who were quietly relocated rather than held accountable. Jorge tried to reopen some of these cases, but each time he met resistance, not just from within the Vatican, but from local dioceses that feared scandal more than justice. Here's the most heartbreaking part. Maria says Jorge blamed himself. He said, "I wanted to protect the faith, but I ended up protecting the system." He believed that the bureaucracy of the Church had become its own form of sin, an institution so focused on self-preservation that it had forgotten its true purpose: mercy, justice, and truth. Then, with what little strength he had left, he gave Maria a small wooden rosary. It wasn't valuable, not made of gold or adorned with jewels, just simple aged wood. But it held a story. He told me this belonged to a boy in Argentina, a boy who came to the Church for help, but was turned away. He took his own life a week later. I've carried this rosary for decades to remind myself of the price of silence. That rosary, Maria now says, is the symbol of her brother's hidden sorrow and the reason she's breaking her own silence. So why is the Vatican refusing to acknowledge these claims? Why is there no official statement about this deathbed promise? Maria says it's because if the world starts digging into those buried cases, into those unofficial files, the damage would be irreversible. She believes there are people inside the Vatican who want to keep Jorge's legacy clean, smiling, reform-minded pope who tried his best. But Jorge himself, in his final moments, wanted the full truth to be known, even if it shattered the very image they were trying to protect. And now, Maria says, she's at a crossroads. Honor the Church's silence or honor her brother's truth. What she does next could send shockwaves through the Catholic world. But it's what she hinted at next that might be the most explosive revelation of all. What Maria claims to know about the man who's expected to succeed Pope Francis and the secret deal he allegedly made long before Jorge's death. As the bells tolled across Vatican City and white smoke once again drifted into the sky, signaling the beginning of a new era, few outside the inner circle knew what had already been arranged behind the scenes. According to Maria Elena Bergoglio, Pope Francis's only living sibling, her brother had long been concerned about his successor, and not because of doctrinal differences, but because of a secret agreement that allegedly took place while Francis was still alive. Maria says this is the part that frightened her the most. During one of their final conversations, Jorge confided something disturbing. He said they've already chosen him, and he promised them silence. Maria was confused. Who was they, and what kind of silence did this new pope owe? That was when Jorge told her a name, Cardinal Matteo Tedesco, a rising figure in the Roman Curia, popular for his charisma, eloquence, and political savvy. But beneath the polished image, Jorge suspected something far more dangerous. According to Maria, Jorge had uncovered correspondence suggesting that Tedesco had made private assurances to some of the most powerful factions in the Vatican, assurances that if he ever became pope, he would not pursue any further investigations into the so-called unopened files, particularly those concerning abuse cases from the late 1980s through the early 2000s in South America, parts of Africa, and Eastern Europe. These were the very cases Pope Francis had tried to bring to light in his later years, and the very cases that were constantly blocked by high-ranking officials within the Church. Jorge said to me, "They want history to forget what happened. But if Tedesco becomes pope, they won't just forget, they'll erase." Maria didn't want to believe it. After all the Church had gone through, decades of public scrutiny over abuse scandals, why would anyone want to bury more truths, especially now? But Jorge insisted that the Vatican was still deeply divided. There were those who truly wanted reform and those who wanted stability at any cost. And in their eyes, reopening old wounds threatened not only their reputations, but the very authority of the Church itself. Shortly after Jorge's health began to visibly decline, Maria says she noticed a shift in his schedule, fewer public appearances, fewer off-the-record interviews with investigative journalists, and most importantly, fewer mentions of accountability. At first, she thought it was fatigue, but then she discovered that several of Jorge's closest advisors had been quietly reassigned or removed. Some of them were replaced by figures loyal to Cardinal Tedesco. According to one unnamed source within the Vatican, there were even whispered rumors that Jorge's upcoming apostolic letter, intended to call for the full transparency of the Church's historical abuse archives, was shelved under pressure just weeks before his death. That letter, Maria says, could have changed everything, and now it might never see the light of day. What Maria is implying is something few have dared say aloud, that Pope Francis was outmaneuvered in his final days, that the very institution he led became increasingly distant from the ideals he once championed, and that his successor may have been chosen not because of his faith, but because of his willingness to maintain the silence Jorge wanted to break. And here's the craziest part. Maria claims she was warned. "I received an anonymous letter," she revealed. It was short, just 3 sentences. It said, "Be careful what you say. Your brother died with dignity. Don't make the world question that." But Maria says she can't stay silent, not when she knows that Jorge's final wishes may have already been buried under layers of Vatican protocol and political gamesmanship. To her, telling the truth is no longer about scandal, it's about legacy. The question now is, will she release the documents? Will she reveal the letters Jorge left behind? Because according to her, he didn't just confide in her with words, he left her with evidence. In a modest wooden chest tucked away in the quiet Buenos Aires home of Maria Elena Bergoglio lies what may be the most explosive collection of handwritten pages in modern church history, Pope Francis's private journal. According to Maria, these journals span the last 2 years of Jorge's life and are filled with raw reflections, coded warnings, and cryptic references to individuals and events that have never been disclosed to the public. What makes this journal so important isn't just that it belonged to the Pope, It's what he chose to write when he knew his time was limited. Maria says, Jorge began journaling daily not long after a major health scare that landed him in the hospital in 2023. She recalls a phone call during which he told her, "I don't know how much longer they'll let me speak freely, but my hand still works and I will write what my voice can't say anymore." What he wrote stunned even her. One of the first entries begins with, "The wolves are circling. My silence is no longer peace, it is fear disguised as obedience." From that point on, the journal reads like a slow descent into both physical decline and spiritual resistance. Jorge chronicles meetings with high-ranking cardinals who, according to his notes, pressured him to stop speaking out about historical cases of abuse. He recounts conversations in which he was urged to protect the unity of the Church rather than seek justice. But Jorge was never one to keep quiet when the vulnerable were involved. One especially haunting entry reads, "To protect the institution. By denying the truth is to crucify Christ again. I have seen the eyes of victims, I have heard their stories, and yet I'm told to remain diplomatic. But I was not made Pope to protect secrets. I was made Pope to serve God." Maria shares that her brother never intended these words to remain hidden. He asked her, in one of their final conversations, to release parts of the journal when the time was right. But that time, she now believes, may never come. Since his death, she claims, she's received multiple requests, some polite, some veiled, threats from church emissaries and anonymous figures demanding to see the journal or persuade her to turn it over. "They told me it would be better for the Church, that it could cause confusion and pain if taken out of context," she says. "But Jorge trusted me with this, and I know now what he meant. The truth will always cause discomfort before it brings healing." Here's the part that truly chills the spine. The last entry in the journal is dated just 3 days before his death. It's short, almost like a goodbye, but also an alarm. It reads, "If this is my final breath, let it not be in vain. The shepherd must not fear the dark, because wolves howl loudest when they sense the morning." Maria has not released the journal in its entirety, but she has allowed a few journalists to view selected pages. Among them was Italian investigative reporter Luca Morelli, who described the writings as the most damning portrait of internal Vatican resistance I've ever seen. He claims that if authenticated in full, the journal would ignite debates not only within the Catholic Church, but among believers worldwide. And this is where it gets even more intense. According to Maria, there's more than just the journal. In the same wooden chest, Pope Francis left behind a sealed envelope marked "in case of betrayal." No one, not even Maria, knows what's inside yet. She says she has been advised not to open it until she's absolutely certain it won't be destroyed or confiscated. Some believe it may contain audio recordings, private testimonies, or even a list of names involved in the power struggle he hinted at in his journal. And with Cardinal Matteo Tedesco, the very man Jorge once feared, now rising to become one of the most powerful voices in the post-Francis era, Maria is more torn than ever. Does she risk everything to share what her
brother left behind?
Or does she remain silent and preserve his image of dignity in death? But this is where the story takes its most heartbreaking turn. Maria recently revealed that she's received messages from the families of abuse survivors, begging her to release the journal. They believe that Pope Francis may have documented things no one else was brave enough to say. They believe he might have named names of priests, bishops, or even cardinals who have escaped accountability. For them, this journal
Isn't just history, it's hope.
So now the question isn't whether Pope Francis was silenced. The question is, will his words still speak louder than the silence he was forced into?